UK Prime Minister Theresa May is hanging by a thread after chief Brexit negotiator David Davis and Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson resigned. With crucial House of Commons votes on trade policy and Brexit looming next week, Ms May's strategy to achieve a soft Brexit appears to be slipping away. New Zealand Initiative Director Oliver Hartwich questions what's taking the UK government so long to do the public's bidding. He joins me now. Winston Peters says every likelihood there's a spill on. Is there?
I think there's a very good likelihood, because all it takes is 48 members of the Commons passing a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, so 15% of her parliamentary party. And the 48, I think, after all the events of the past 1.5 years, shouldn't be difficult to get them together.
So with those two people going in particular, does that mean that the strategy, have they just decided coincidentally to leave at this particular point, or does it look like, yeah, the move is on, you're out?
Well, it doesn't come as a surprise, because both Boris Johnson and David Davis have for a long time signaled that they're unhappy with the direction that the Prime Minister is taking Britain towards Brexit. So really, it didn't come as a surprise. Maybe the timing was surprising, because still just a few days ago at the Prime Minister's cabinet meeting at Chequers, there was a display of unanimity, at least on the outside. So timing-wise, it came as a bit of a surprise, but really, this process has been underway for quite some time.
So is this the soft exit Brexit versus the hard?
Yes, basically that's the discussion that they've been having for a long time, basically since the referendum. And the Prime Minister, of course, a Remainer originally herself, was trying to negotiate between the two sides of her party, the two wings, if you like. And what she proposed at Chequers was a soft Brexit, a very soft Brexit, which would have effectively turned Britain into a colony of Europe. So still tied into many of the EU's mechanisms, including submitting itself to a jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. And that was simply not acceptable to the hard Brexiteers who really wanted to cut the ties with Europe and actually have Britain stand on its own two feet again.
In Boris Johnson's resignation letter, he said the dream of the British vote to leave the EU is dying, suffocated by needless self-doubt. The mere fact it's taken 2 years to negotiate a simple departure and we still don't have it. Is he right?
Yes, I think he is right, because once Britain decided that they wanted to leave the European Union, they should have installed a Brexiteer with a clear vision to implement Brexit. What they did instead was they preferred Theresa May, put a Remainer in charge who really didn't have an idea where Brexit might be heading. And so when Boris Johnson complains that there was simply no clarity on the vision forward, he's right. Because Britain could have spelled out that Brexit may not have been what every Briton wanted in that referendum, but now that it's decided, let's make the best out of it. And making the best out of Brexit would have meant taking control of your own trade policy again, trying to define a different place for Britain in the world, trying to negotiate different trade agreements with the rest of the world outside Europe. And instead what they're doing is, from the first moment, Theresa May tried to keep a very close relationship with the European Union, which was totally incompatible with that vision.
But what do Europe want?
Well, it doesn't really matter what Europe wants. It should be Britain first and foremost deciding itself what it wants. And once you decide for Brexit, there is just no point being really glued to the European Union, because that takes away all the other freedoms that Brexit might have offered.
What does business want? Because you've got Airbus saying, we're going to pull out probably. You've got the banks saying, we're going to pull out. Which side is business on?
Well, I think business really wants certainty. They want to know where it's going. And in the end, you have to find a settlement and define that that's what's going to be for the next 10, 20, 30 years. What business doesn't like is uncertainty, and I think there was way too much of that in the last couple of years.
Many of the civil service staff on the UK's negotiation team support the UK staying in the EU, as you mentioned, as does Theresa May. So has that got anything to do with the undermining of the Brexit vote?
Yes, totally. And you have that same division, of course, in Cabinet. You have the division, or until today, between Boris Johnson and Philip Hammond, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So you've got different factions working in the parliamentary party for the Conservatives, but also different factions within the Cabinet and even different factions within different ministries. So Britain was completely divided going into these negotiations, not with one voice, but with many. And that, of course, doesn't work. And I think they should have had a good brainstorming session right at the beginning of this process to define what they want. And I think a more practical solution to all of this would have been to say, look, we're going to define our position. It doesn't matter what the EU says. We're going to put two offers on the table. We can either go back to a WTO status and let the European Union trade with us on these rules, or we offer a comprehensive free trade agreement with them while still retaining our independence to have similar agreements with the rest of the world. And that's our position, and Brussels, you can take it or leave it. Instead, what they were trying to do was they were trying to accommodate all sorts of demands from Brussels, and that simply didn't work because it weakened their own position.
Which position is better for New Zealand?
Well, I think from a New Zealand perspective, what we want to have a good trading relationship with both the European Union and with the UK once they have left the European Union. I think with a New Zealand-EU free trade deal, we have made some progress in the last few weeks. We had the EU Trade Commissioner in New Zealand for that. But then, once Britain is out, of course, they should be free to negotiate their own deals, provided, of course, they don't subject themselves to the kind of deal that Theresa May wants, because that would actually limit Britain's opportunities for signing up to trade deals.
Jacob Rees-Mogg is often tipped to replace May if she fails a vote of no confidence. Can he achieve a Brexit exit?
Well, at least he would be a much more interesting character than Theresa May. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, often mocked as the member for the 19th century because of his habitus and how he presents himself. But again, he would have the same challenge, just from a different perspective, uniting his party. Where Theresa May came from a Remainer side, Jacob Rees-Mogg obviously comes from a more conservative, staunch conservative Brexiteer side, but he would face exactly the same challenge now, just from the other side of politics, uniting that party which effectively is split.
Can the EU force Britain, if you like, into a second Brexit vote?
No, they can't, because the process is now governed by the European Treaty and by European laws. Britain triggered Brexit, not with a referendum, but with a handing over a letter in Brussels. So the exit date is set. It's the 29th of March next year. And you could only negotiate an extension or any kind of different procedure now with a unanimous agreement between Britain and 27 other EU members, and that's not likely to happen.
The exit Brexit date, if you like, is set. Is this going to be sorted out before then?
You would hope so. But
and what happens if it isn't?
If it isn't, it will be an uncoordinated Brexit. So Britain would just simply cease to be a member of the European Union without having any agreement on the future relationship.
And what would that mean?
Well, that would probably mean that Britain falls back to WTO rules, which in itself might not be the worst of all options.
So how long or how many days has Theresa May got?
She has to sort it out this week. Seriously, if Boris Johnson wants to perhaps have a go at the leadership of the party, that would have to happen this week. And I can't imagine Boris Johnson resigning just to be content as a backbencher.
Yeah, some say that he's doing it sneakily, and some say he's just doing it because he's doing the honourable thing. Which is it?
Well, I think it was always clear that Boris Johnson had ambitions well beyond being previously Mayor of London or Foreign Secretary. He wants to be Prime Minister. That was clear from the beginning. I think it is quite inconceivable to have Boris Johnson on the backbenches for too long.
New Zealand Initiative Director Oliver Hartwich, appreciate you speaking to NBR. Thank you.
Thank you.